If you know my story, you know that a big part of my journey to being a successful influencer, creator, actor on Broadway was my decision to get sober. And I talk very openly about that journey of dealing with my addiction, but mostly not because I think that everyone has to get sober, right? It's that I think that success starts with learning how to be our best version of ourselves, striving to meet your potential in as many ways as possible. And that's why I'm super glad that I found Best Self. Best Self is a company that creates journals that help you live your best life. They have a self journal, they have a best self planner, they have a hero's journal, they have a relationship journal, which is actually how Steven and I fell on it because we started using the relationship journals and found it to be such a powerful way to set our family up before we had our son. And I want to make sure you know about Best Self, and I have a discount code for you. If you go to the link in my show notes below, you can check out what they have and see if there's a journal that's right for you. We cannot pull water from an empty well. So if you're a creative and you want to be known, you need to have a really strong sense of who you are, the blocks and the things that are getting in your way, something I love to talk about, and you need to have a system and steps to get out of that. And Best Self makes it super easy for you to do that. So check out the show notes and click the link to go check out Best Self. I hope you love it as much as I do. Okay, yesterday was the Tony Awards, and I have moved on. I have rebranded. I don't talk about Broadway as much anymore because I now serve a larger audience, but I will never get away from my theater community. I absolutely miss it. I love it. I continue to audition. And so, of course, I had to watch the Tony Awards. And if you didn't watch it, it was really, really exciting. It was probably one of the best Tony Awards they've had in decades because it just didn't feel like the same old regime of people who've been running the show for so long. Ariana DeBose, and that's who we're going to talk about today for today's Creative Tuesdays, was so stellar in hosting the show, and she is a Afro-Latina, queer-identifying, Oscar-winning actor who I have known for decades and watched work her way to where she is. And I want to talk a little bit about how she was able over those years to use social media to do just that. I find social media has always been such a great outlet, and she, since I've known her, has been one of the people that embraced social media and really used it to her advantage. And I hope in talking about this today, you can start to look at how you yourself can use your social media, particularly Instagram at this point, to move yourself forward, maybe even win an Oscar or host the Tony Awards. So when I knew Ariana DeBose, she was a dancer making the rounds, auditioning. She had done, when I met her, I think she had already done the Hamilton show down at the Public. It hadn't moved to Broadway yet. And we were in an on-camera acting class together. And we actually got to sing together in Connecticut at a country club. It was so random, by her friend and a friend of mine, Ben Ralhalla. And I have this awesome photo of us. We had so much fun that day. I never would have thought then that she would be where she is now. And what I witnessed as she started to climb is her real embracing of her vision. If you've taken the CreatiVisibility course, we talk about your vision being so important, knowing where it is you want to go, and then broadcasting that into the world. Now, some people, aren't going to like it, right? And that's one of the most important things I think you can learn is that along your path, not everyone's going to like your vision for you. That's why it's so important that you have one that's really clear and specific, because it won't matter what other people think. And for Ariana, I really saw that for her. She had won So You Think You Can Dance, or had competed on So You Think You Can Dance, had been making the rounds in the Broadway community, was working on her on-camera skills, was trying to get more auditions. But what was most important that I saw was she started to create a following on Instagram. And it wasn't even that her following was huge, it was that she was so consistent in creating quality content that her brand became known. She would do what I talk about in the program as well, is she would do these branding photo shoots. She would find up and coming photographers in and around New York City. She would meet them maybe at shows or at parties, or she would reach out to people who were in the New York theater or New York community who were photographers and say, hey, I'd love to do a photo shoot. And she would share those photos and tag them. And that would help them grow their following, right? It's tit for tat, it would help her have content. And I remember she would just have beautiful photos, Roberto Araujo, there's Curtis Brown, she would go do these photo shoots. And I was so inspired by it. I started to do the same thing, right? And this is the thing I really loved about Ariana and the way she hosted the Tonys, is she continues to advocate for others. And she did at that time as well, even though it was in her benefit, she always gave credit to the photographers. She always gave credit to the people who helped style her. And I remember when she got Hamilton, I'm sure in rehearsals, worked very hard with the creative team, as that whole ensemble did. And she created this idea of the bullet through her movement, right? And she played, quote unquote, the bullet in Hamilton, if you've watched on Disney Plus or if you've saw it on Broadway. And because she was able to really create this sort of standout idea in the show, she hashtagged herself the bullet. And all through Hamilton, she would hashtag her account the bullet. And I remember that stood out to me so much, because she knew that people were going to see Hamilton, and if they looked and saw, they would go, that's the bullet. They would look up the bullet. And it was through that branding of herself and through her sort of fearlessness of giving herself credit for what she was doing, instead of what a lot of artists do is sort of like, well, I'm going to humbly wait for people to recognize me. She said, no, this is a recognizable moment. I'm going to take credit for it. Through that, she really started to build her following, her reputation. And I remember she was interviewed, and in that interview, there was a publication, which you can't find anymore, ironically enough, where she said, I'm no longer going to be in the ensemble. And a lot of people were up in arms about it, and it kind of offended. But I also remember thinking, good for you. Broadcast it to the world. Broadcast it. I say this all the time, the more you say what it is you want, the more likely that is to happen. And she is living proof that she was able to take this vision for herself and manifest it into reality. So I want you to think through for yourself the things that you've done, the things that stand out. If you are, for instance, something I'm sort of working on right now is people know me as the Reels guy because I post so many Reels. But how am I different from other Reels people? Well, my Reels aren't very polished. My Reels are very on the fly. I'm able to do it very consistently, twice a day. And I tend to be really good at telling stories in my Reels. So how do I become the real storyteller, all right? How do I become the guy who teaches you how to stay consistent without going crazy? I have to look at that, right? But that's something that I've built success around. What about you? Is there something that people know you for? They recognize your work in some way. It could have been last month. It could have been 10 years ago. How do you capitalize on that? How do you say, okay, people know me for this. Is there a hashtag I can create, right? I could create a hashtag real storyteller, REEL, right? And that, to me, gives you this chance to build a brand. Other thing I want to challenge you to do is start to look at how you can broadcast out to the world your vision, what it is you want. Can you say out loud in a caption, in an Instagram reel, in your stories, I want to have this many clients, or I want to make this much money from brand deals and sponsorships in the next year, or I want to grow my following to this amount. The more you can say it out to the world in as many ways as possible, even at dinner with your parents, the more likely the universe is going to conspire to meet that vision. So Ariana, bravo, bravo, bravo. I love her. I will probably have her on the podcast at some point because we do text and I adore her, but she's very busy now. However, we're going to take a look. Go into her Instagram and look back 5, maybe even 10 years ago on her Instagram and see the kind of content that she was making and know that's where we are, right? If you're just now starting, experiment, get out there, make a community with photographers that you use, with the videographers that you use, the editors that you use. Make sure you know that you're not alone, that it's okay to reach out. And I promise you that if you're consistent, whatever it takes, you're going to achieve the vision that you have for yourself. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. And if you did, please do me a huge favor to support this podcast by going over and leaving a review and or both. You can always take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram stories or whatever social media platform is your primary platform. And again, I want you to check out Best Self. It is so important that we have a system for taking care of ourselves, that we're constantly getting in check with our mental state, because being an entrepreneur, being a creative, it can feel very, very lonely, and you're not alone out there. You need to know exactly what things are getting in your way. You need to figure out how to meet your potential, not just in your career, but in your life as well. So Best Self, check the link below. You'll get a discount on any of their journals. I love the relationship journal that Steven and I used, and I can't wait to hear what you think as well. Don't forget to be creatively visible.